Sensors, sensors, sensors. They're front and center of our digital world and are here to stay. They collect data and make our lives a lot easier. For coffee production, roasting, and brewing, sensors can make these jobs much easier and much more efficient. Dive into the world of sensors with Nick and Norbert.
We live in a connected world now. Everything is connected. Your devices are connected to sensors in your roastery, in your warehouse. You have all the data. You can see what's happening in your warehouse. Everything's intertwined, right?
Absolutely.
And by using all those things, you can make operations more efficient, your workflows more efficient. What do you think? Is this a good thing?
Oh, well, that's a big question, right from the start. Is it a good thing? I would say in general, yes, it is a good thing, because our approach and my thoughts is always having more data gives you more opportunity for decision making, gives you more data to rely on, so you can look a little bit more into the past,
Yeah.
what has happened. So with those connected devices, so first of all, I want to make a little bit of differentiation between the a workplace, a roastery, and our personal life.
Yeah.
Because I feel we should not mix those, because we're getting into the discussion of like, oh, our phone is connected all the time, listen to us all the time. We have Alexa listening all the time. We have our
Siri.
Siri, and all the TV is looking at us all the time.
Yeah.
Those things might be that's a different discussion in my opinion. But let's look at let's say at a company.
Yeah.
So in a business, how good is it to in a business you might have different warehouses, you might have different workspaces. I really like the idea of having a smart thermostat in the office.
Yeah.
Which even also at home, but also at the office, where not everybody might be in every day to regulate, or a person who is always around, making sure everybody's comfortable.
Yeah.
So having connected devices doing this for us, I think is a great thing. I can do it remotely. I know a little bit more what has happened in the past. I can tune machines towards my goal. And you also had these questions like energy use. I think ultimately it always helps us understand our systems better. If we have more devices, if we have more sensors, we will have a better picture of what's going on. And if that picture shows us potential for savings or for optimization, then that's exactly what we can do. So what I'm saying is basically having devices connected gives us the potential to save. It's not automatically this oh, you connect and you will save. But it gives us the potential to review our patterns.
Okay.
And with smart systems, and there's different layers. So one is the sensor layer. The sensor just reads, for example, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. Those are, for example, the readings we can get from the Cropster ambient kit. You can have get the gas valves in our roasters. You can have light sensors. There's all kinds of other sensors you can connect. So they just read.
Okay.
The second layer is a feedback layer. Like humans tell me, I like the temperature, I'm too cold, I'm too warm. So I get input of like, how is what's read at a certain time perceived.
Okay.
And the two together allow us to optimize. It's like, well, the sensors read 74 degrees. Like, oh, that might be really cold. People don't like it, so they want to go to 76. So we crank up the heat a little bit, or they lower the air condition, and we're at 76, and then people suddenly start responding with, I feel comfortable, I feel great, this is good, I feel productive. So it's not only a cognitive, like, how do you feel about temperature, but a general, like, how do you feel? And I know it might sound a little bit crazy, but if people feel right, then you want to know why is that. Well, it could be because they just got a raise, or did someone came in with donuts, or other inputs. But so you can, but you could measure all this, or you can log all the influencing factors, and then suddenly you realize, oh, it's a mixture of the amount of sunlight coming into the office. People feel less irritated when they work on screens.
True.
I noticed that myself. If I open my blinds too much in summer, we get so much light in here.
Yeah.
And I really have to focus on my screen, and I feel more dense.
Okay.
And more, and my eyes notice that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all those things you can measure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then get the feedback and then optimize. And I think that optimization process is what's so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also want to be careful of not overdoing it. I mean, when we started out, so I go a little bit back in the past. I don't know if that's
go for it.
That's a good thing.
No, it's always good.
But I remember 10 years ago visiting roasteries. We had roasteries who put in like 8 to 10 sensors, temperature sensors into the roasting machines.
Jeez.
I know, it's a lot of there's a lot of sensors, it's a lot of data, and it's like, no, we just want to know everything. And I offered them Cropster. It's like, well, here we can read up to 4 sensors, and just like, go away. We need 10 sensors.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, oh, that's a lot.
It's like overkill.
Well, yeah, and I think over the time we realized we need maybe 2 to 3.
Okay.
To be most efficient, and then maybe we need to read not only temperature but also drum pressure, drum speed, and a few other parameters.
Yeah.
So I kind of my head, I want to go back to the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Which we had in some early episodes. What is the sensor with the most impact?
Okay.
And not just because we can measure everything and we can create all those data points, it means that we can make use of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understandable that when the topic is very new and we don't know much about it, we want to go a little bit more is better.
Yeah, yeah.
And logging more might lead us to the better answers. But over the long run, we should really try to focus also eliminating what we don't need.
Yeah.
So we are not getting into this huge data jungle, which then is really hard to interpret, hard to store, costly, of course.
Yeah.
Those I would say are my initial thoughts.
So then maybe like let's talk a little bit on the farm level in origin.
Yeah.
Obviously with like the recent frost in Brazil, huge like climatic impacts on like the coffee and whatnot, and not saying that having sensors would have helped farmers save their trees, but how in like let's say in certain environments where there's certain variables that you can't control, like weather.
Yeah.
Where does having a connected business at a farm with sensors, where can that at least help save certain aspects of the farm, whether it's certain trees or the coffee drying or whatever,
Yeah, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
and also a very tricky one. I believe on the farm level we still want to know a lot about what's going on at the farm, of course with the climate, of course with like the soil, and the whole the whole biological dynamic is very, very complex. So measuring everything is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But getting the ball rolling and starting measure what's measured fairly easy, and that's, for example, temperature.
Yeah.
So having temperature sensors on the ground, knowing how was the cold pattern, for example, right? It makes a huge difference if you just had a cold peak for 5 minutes, or if the cold was creeping in for 26 hours and then really stayed there for 3 days or something like that, right? So it's not only the the max event. It's like, oh, we had temperature up to minus whatever,
Yeah.
right? It is also how did the weather come about.
Okay.
That makes a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I was just learning recently. It's the same with, and we're talking about energy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Heating water. Um, if you want to heat water to boiling temperature,
Uh-huh.
there's basically two strategies. You just put in, well, there's several strategies, but there's the long way. So you heat it up over a long period of time, which means the total energy input is lower. You might have
Okay.
noticed. Well, actually, so I just learned this today. That's why
It's so fresh in your
that's why
head.
it's very fresh. If you have an eco mode in your washing machine,
Okay.
it
Oh yeah.
it suddenly takes you 3 times longer to wash. And one of the reasons is because the eco mode heats up the water over a longer period of time to
Okay.
save energy.
Yeah.
If you boil water for cooking or for brewing coffee, you want to have this quick, right?
Yeah.
So you put in a lot of power in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
and it might be the same result. So if you have like, oh, we have boiling water here in 2 minutes
Yeah.
versus boiling water in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And the energy used in the 2 minute is substantially higher than the temperature used over 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
And that's also the same like with gas usage in a roaster.
Yeah.
We don't know all the details yet, so I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to appear as like, oh, I have all those answers. Those
Yeah.
are just bits and pieces. I heard, I reflected on a little bit, and it makes general sense.
Yeah.
But it's not a like a confirmation of this is exactly what we need to do.
Yeah.
So I come back to the sensors. Like,
Yep.
we need to measure. We need to measure those events and see how can we compare outputs, it's like same outputs,
Yeah.
boiling water, with different ways of getting there,
Okay.
like roasting coffee.
Yep.
Knowing that it's much complexer than just getting coffee to a certain temperature. It's also about how we get there. We know that the rate of rise
Yep.
is super impactful. Flick can impact all those.
Yeah.
So switching back to the farm, same thing. We
Yeah.
want to know how the weather pattern has evolved, how certain water patterns happen, how sun sun patterns,
Yeah.
and all this is measured.
Mm.
It's just and it's also used like in research studies. You can see a lot of those data sets being used. That reminds me of my work
Yeah.
in Colombia.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we did or that some of our team members did. They just looked at intense hourly weather data, and then predicted certain events, predicted frosts, predicted droughts, and then ultimately predicted climate change,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is now seemingly more aggressive than was potentially predicted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we already had certain models
Yeah.
looking into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to like, do we need sensors? Absolutely. Is this are we yet at like final answers? I think absolutely not. This
Yeah.
is just the starting point. Why is that? In my opinion, this is also because of availability.
Yeah.
We have the farm is the farms are big. This is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like a one machine, one roaster. You
Yeah.
put in 3 sensors. It's fairly controllable.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoying this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast? This podcast would not be possible without the support of Cropster. Whether it's tracking harvest yields, roastery and inventory management, or simply tracking brew recipes, Cropster Origin, Cropster Roast, and Cropster Cafe can help you streamline your workflows and help you operate more efficiently.
And that's kind of what I'm thinking too. It's not even on like the sensors aspect,
Mhm.
but just in terms of having your business connected to like a cloud, like Cropster,
Mhm.
having everything digitized. I feel like just with that alone and being able to collect all the data you can at your farm, such as, you know, uh, coffee reception after it's been picked.
Right.
And I feel like having it down to the point where you know exactly at what time this lot was picked at this part of the farm on this date, and then for future harvests, you know, producers have a better understanding of like when, how much work, how much labor they'll need, at what
Yeah.
time they'll need, how much they're then going to be expected to, that labor is going to cost, right?
Right. I think the patterns is always the same.
Yeah.
So you record what you're doing, or you record your ambient, and then based on that you can analyze and you can take decisions.
Yeah.
And now we have the cloud, which allows us to really bring data from different areas together, which also allows us for more permanent storage and for analyzation done by someone who knows how to look at data.
Yeah.
So I mean that's what we partly do. We recommend we run data through certain filters so that it's actually digestible.
Yeah.
We just look at I mean again the easy example is a temperature curve.
Yeah.
You just put the temperature value there for every second.
Yep.
When you do this on paper, you have like these big tables.
Yeah.
And then it's 210, 212, 213. It's really hard to understand the data. Now we have a graph and it's very simple.
Yeah.
And it just shows you temperature over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is a simple application. If you have 15 more data sets and maybe conflicting data, that also happens. So the sensors read something and it might not be 100% accurate, or it might be accurate for that specific niche, but it's not a general trend. So you need to find those patterns.
Yeah.
You need to eliminate the noise and it's the same like when in social media chatter there's a lot of noise in there. Like, what is the message? Or when there's a lot of people talking, like, what is the main message? What are those people thinking?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, something comes through. There's certain things are repeated here, so you get a better idea.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes that's for the most of us who use technology, that's a hard thing to understand is like, okay, we have all this data that we're collecting and it can become overwhelming, but sometimes not knowing what to do with that data or how to communicate that data in an effective way is problematic in the sense you just you don't know what to do with all this information.
That is very true. So, that goes back to episode 1 probably, where we talked about the data information knowledge pyramid, where there's a lot of data which needs to be interpreted in a certain way so to become information, which then can be linked to experience and be useful as wisdom, as something we know how to apply.
Yeah.
And that's where information managers come in, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we do. What many other companies are doing.
Yeah.
Assisting the world in capturing data and interpreting that data. And the data capture has become so much more accessible. So we have all those mobile devices which are fairly cost effective. We have internet which is affordable and available.
Yeah.
And now we have sensors.
Yeah.
So sensors is super exciting.
Yeah.
Most of the sensors, for example, temperature sensors or barometric pressure or gyro sensors for positioning, all those things were really expensive 20 years ago, even 15 years ago. Because they had very specific applications and there was not a mass market for it.
Got it.
And by the way, they were super big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now they are very small and very, very, very cost effective because they are in every cell phone. And through that development of cell phones, now suddenly they are sold millions and millions of times.
Okay.
So production became really cost effective.
Yeah.
And we can all benefit from that.
Yeah.
So now the sensors you get for, well, I don't know, what was like $1,000 in the past is now maybe a 20.
Jeez.
It's massive. It's massive. And it's available. You can get it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a super exciting development. We also
Yeah.
need to be careful. It's like not putting a sensor on every tree might not be exactly what we need.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, especially in agriculture, we want to be careful of not overdoing it, but understanding those ecosystems a little bit better and having a little bit more data available
Yeah.
on the ground, not only interpolated. Because right now, what we have satellite data.
Mm-hmm.
That's not bad, but it's actually pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's still like one or two steps removed from the actual reality in a specific field.
Okay.
There might be clouds, there's interferences, so it it's a great approximation.
Okay.
Having a sensor right there
Yeah.
can validate or correct that data.
Okay.
So that's where I'm thinking. So having a few more data points on the ground, and then working with the interpolated or approximated satellite data sets
Yeah.
can bring you very close to reality.
Okay. No, yeah, that makes sense for sure. So then let's go to the other side of the supply chain, roasters. We've talked
Yeah.
a lot about on the farm, but roasters, having a connected roastery and understanding everything that's happening in your roastery and whatnot, the barometric pressure, the temperature, the humidity, super important to how it affects roasting. But then when you have all that control over that kind of over those kinds of that kind of information,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, you can almost, I mean, all those things require energy and controlling the energy that's being put through to have that control over, the temperature, for example. In a way, I feel like having sense and having being connected can almost, in a way, save those roasteries, their energy bill, for example, because now they know, well, the temperature needs to be at this time, or needs to be on at this time at this temperature, but during this time and that temperature, or this time and it doesn't need to be on, and maybe it saves,
Right.
maybe it costs more.
Yeah.
And I feel like having that data gets now down to precise costs behind it, right?
Absolutely. So the more precise we can be, the more we know when is it smart to put in energy and when is it smart to actually not.
Mm,
And you have different effects. And I think that a roastery is it's definitely a manageable environment, but already potentially a little bit more complex than your home.
mm-hmm.
And even there, we're trying to learn, we're
Yeah.
trying to adapt. I mean, the energy companies are sending me emails every other day. It's like, hey, right, well, right now, of course, it's very hot outside, so we get all those.
Yeah.
Hey, can you reduce your energy from 5 to 7? Um, do not lower your AC below a certain temperature.
Yeah.
Try not to wash your laundry at that time, just to balance the grid,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
their desire is to make sure we have enough energy from our power plants so that
Yeah.
everybody can get through the day.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, I think, also for roasteries at some point that might come in, or for any business really. Just think about, what if all of our businesses would be solar powered? Then
Mm.
we have a very clear time of day where we produce energy,
Yep. Yep.
and then some time of day where we can still rely on battery packed energy. But battery packed or stored energy is always more costly.
Yeah.
You always have an intermediary step. But what if we can, whatever is produced in that moment, we can use.
Yeah.
And sensors help us to identify that. It's
Yeah.
like, how can we shift things around so we can still do the same amount of work, um, but with less energy cost or with less energy impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course optimizing processes in a way that I try to play with that in my own
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
sometimes, and all those smart sensors do that too. That the smart thermostats.
Yeah.
I come back to that example because it's so tangible. A lot of us have those sensors or
Mm-hmm.
have that experience. Um, if it's very cold outside, I feel like I want it a little bit warmer inside. That's also big, because of like isolation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then there's days where it's where I feel like, why is it so warm inside? It's like, well, it's still the same temperature. So like in winter, like I heat up the
Yeah.
same temperature, but actually I'm okay with 2 degrees less. So how can we make that that feedback immediate and the system learn.
Yeah.
So we are not overdoing it.
Yeah.
Because those 1 degrees, that extra degree of air condition or that extra degree of heating,
it makes a difference inside.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And just multiply that by millions of homes, or the same with roasteries, multiply that to thousands and thousands of roasting machines.
Yeah.
If there's a smarter way to heat them up.
Yeah.
What I said, for example, maybe that heating process of a roasting machine, instead of doing it for half an hour, doing it over 2 hours, but saving time.
Yeah.
Again, this is not yet confirmed, so we're still looking at more data, getting more insights of what is a meaningful heat up pattern.
Yeah.
And which is, it has the impact of the machine is ready to roast, right?
Yep.
We don't want to lose the actual capacity of the machine.
Yeah.
But also doing it in a more environmental friendly or energy saving way.
Yeah. Yeah, this makes me think, I mean, with the idea of like not just sensors in a roastery, but in general, when you mentioned the smart thermostat, having smart tech, like using AI, it's almost wild to me, because like the more data we give it, or the more information we give it, and we, for example, in your case with the thermostat in your house, the more you change it based on how you feel,
right,
the more that technology collects that information and uses it, and in a way, it's learning what we're feeling and what we want.
Right.
Like that, I don't know. For me, that's kind of a wild thing, because it's like, I mean, essentially, like a technology, like a robot, is learning about how we feel by us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I think the way you
okay, and then
the way you phrase it might be a little bit creepy.
No, but let's put it on the roastery. Like,
yeah,
the more a roastery feeds information to a sensor of, okay, at this time we have this temperature and we have this humidity on, and at this time we don't. The sensor and the technology is learning by the hour, by the second, what that environment is like, and at a certain point, it's going to learn so much, maybe it'll be so smart that it'll be able to operate on its own, and we as humans won't have to eventually be changing those temperatures, because it's already going to know, okay, at this time they like this temperature, this humidity, and the person could just go and roast the coffee.
Right. Of course, I mean, it will help us to focus the human creativity and energy on the parts which are not yet created and which are unique and special. And I also would say it's keeping the system real, keeping the system grounded. Because we always need that, as I mentioned, having a reference point, a reference sensor for the estimate. So if I compare the AI is the approximation of the weather data, right? And the human is the sensor on the ground.
Yeah.
That keeps the system real. That keeps the system working and calibrated and focused on what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And again, the system is extremely complex. AIs are smart, and they're getting smarter. Yet the human brain, human senses are extremely developed and extremely smart. So I wouldn't be, I think that's always needed.
Yeah.
And that, like, working together is the beauty.
Yeah.
I'm really scared of an AI doing its own thing without that grounding, without that reference point,
without a human driving it.
And I think it will go wrong. It might not be totally wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm sometimes very curious, especially about those smart thermostats at home.
Yeah.
My patterns change.
Yeah.
If I have a visitor over, if I have a party, if I do something special in my home, then I suddenly I break the patterns.
Yeah.
Will the AI know about that, or will it just adjust everything? And it's like, no, you shouldn't adjust everything. This was a one-time event. This was an exception.
Yeah. That's true.
And I think that's where of course you get smarter, and we'll see what's noise or what's outliers, and reevaluate. It will take some time.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things. So I'm very excited about data. I think it's very useful to go back and analyze and know your history.
Yeah.
I'm all about that. In terms of giving the AI its own, like, do what it is and we all trust it.
Yeah.
I'm not on that side. I do not automatically trust the AI until it's proven it is smart and it is good.
Yeah.
For like roast curve prediction, we came to that point where after millions and millions of roast curves and looking at what the AI comes up with, we can say yes, it's smart enough to really help us.
Okay.
Flick prediction.
Yeah.
First crack prediction. Those things, yes, we can do. Would I have the AI create a totally new roast profile for a totally new coffee? Yes and no. Yes, for it's like, give me a starting point.
Yeah, a reference.
Give me an idea.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to verify that idea, and I want to be there when I do it. So it's like, I want to roast that coffee. I want to smell that coffee. I want to be there when I do it the first time. And maybe the AI is right, and I have something very good. Then great.
Yeah.
We all got to much faster to a much greater result.
Absolutely.
But maybe I also want to tweak it still a little bit, and then really get to from a good result to an excellent result.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Thanks, Norbert.
Sure, Nick. Yeah, this is always a pleasure. Big topics, man.
Yeah, man, all the way.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast. To learn more about Cropster, subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. For more educational content, visit cropster.com/learn.